Hi, this is Lee Larsen, and here is my artifact for my planning standard for my evaluation documentation log. My artifact is a video. I thought it would be more efficient, a better use of our time, and a little more clear and a little easier than writing out annotations for a bunch of pictures that I wanted to include. I also can only include one artifact, but planning is pretty broad, so I thought what I will do is give you a very brief overview of my approach to planning, what's important to me in planning, and a quick summary of the resources I use and how I go about it. So I started with this picture. My desk might be filled with all kinds of things like this in one planning session. So I'll go over briefly what each of these are, and I'll include a few other pictures as well, including some online resources, and I'll share what those are and how I use those, including some focused, detailed, zoomed in pictures on some of those resources as well. That should give you a pretty good idea about how I go about planning. Okay, so those are the pictures I'll be going through, and I'll talk about each one a little bit. So first of all, here I have my conversational solfeggio, conversational solfege flashcards and notebooks. There are two large 3-ring notebooks full of resources such as songs and poems, and in particular a big bag of tricks, you might say in a casual way, a large repertoire of teaching strategies and fun ways that children can practice becoming conversant, you might say, in both rhythmic and pitch skill sets through elementary school. At every step in the process, it's important to make sure that the children are tuneful, beatful, and artful, singing a tune, keeping a steady beat, and being expressive, even with the simplest rhythmic or pitch sets elements that they're working on. So it's very logically sequenced. It's not organized by grade level in this, I guess you could call it a curriculum, a sort of a resource collection, a collection of strategies, I like to think of it as. And I like that because you can meet the children where they are. You might come from one school to another school, and maybe the first graders there are already at where a lot of second graders are at another school. Maybe they have music 3 times a week. Maybe at another school, the third graders had music only once a week, and so they're still learning what another school might be doing in second grade. So it's sequential, but not necessarily assigned to a grade. You can meet the children where they're at and get them to where they need to be. I'm also fully Orff Schulwerk certified, which was 12 graduate credits plus many other workshops at conferences and such outside of that. These are the original Orff Schulwerk volumes, 5-volume set plus some supplementals published in Europe in the 50s and 60s, and then more recent Orff supplementals, we call them in our profession, our little corner of the music education world. And the difference is this between some of the older Orff Schulwerk materials and the newer ones. The older Orff Schulwerk pieces are more implicit what you're supposed to do with them. There's not a lot of text guidance to teachers, so especially for young teachers, especially those that haven't taken the Orff Schulwerk coursework, this can be a little intimidating. Whereas the newer publications tend to follow a learned format or something similar and give some background information and give you extensions you could do or ways to modify it for special populations, and spell out things a little bit more clearly for teachers. And it's almost like attending a workshop or a conference and walking away with a lot of how-to. So they've become a little more user-friendly, but the original approach to Orff Schulwerk of leading towards more complex music by building up towards that from elemental pieces put together with different layers of pitched and non-pitched percussion, and letting the music literacy grow out of experiencing it first. That's very important. Sound before sight is one way that that's said in the conversational solfege world as well. Sound before sight. And also what's important is the connection between movement and music. Music moves, and movement should feel musical. And so there's a lot of connection between that. In my classroom, and I try to plan on movement and creative music being a part of what the kids do at every grade level throughout the year. So those resources are important to me, if not as a reminder, as much as to be actually used for them the literature itself. Uh, I use children's literature a lot in my classroom. One reason is I try to make connections to the curriculum in math, language arts, social studies, but also to make cultural and historical connections with just music history. The slave spirituals are a big part of American musical history, and we can make that come alive more with storybooks or poems in the classroom. I also try to make cross-curricular connections by inviting the team leads to share with us what they're working on. Miss Prescian in first grade shares with us that what they're doing every week. So the first week of school, if she's working on recognizing and writing numbers to 10, and I know about that, that makes it very easy for me to find my book on my shelf called All Aboard the Animal Train, which has a chant, clickety-clack, clickety-clack, the animal train moves down the track. And all of a sudden, I'm working on making music in a group, which is one of the standard POS objectives for first grade. Adding a steady beat on a drum to that. Working on dynamics and expressivity. Can you do it softer? Can you do it louder? Can we do it faster? Can we do it slower as the train is moving around the room? And every page of the book has a different number of animals of different types in each train car. So it's a fun storybook, but it's very, very conducive to music education. Tiki Tiki Tembo, a well-known primary grades book, is also something I use every year, usually with second grade when they're starting to experience 4/16th notes before we're writing and reading 16th notes. I want to point out something. I usually look towards this more in the early part of the process, by the way, before I go to the resources I've been sharing. So online we have some nice summaries of our POS in different formats that FCPS Fine Arts has developed in conjunction with music teachers. How can we make this more useful kind of a thing? And summer curriculum development teams have met many times over the last couple decades. And we've got some very useful PDFs up there now on our Music Blackboard site, which is where I can find this and this. I'll get back to that. So suggested yearly overviews, but one thing that I really like about Fairfax County is this is one possible option to guide music instruction. Teachers may opt to use provided activities and lessons, modify or adapt them, or create original lessons aligned with the POS. So this is great. I've talked to teachers at other counties where you must use this song in this week, in this quarter, and here's your assessment. And they have very little opportunity for professional development and leadership development in terms of sharing ideas and creating new ideas, and I think it takes away some collaboration and some of the fun of being a music teacher to be assigned such great detail that you can't explore the vast resources. As you can see, this isn't even half of my Orff-Schul Work supplemental collection. This is one large book that does have songs in it, but it's more of a pedagogical book. I have thousands of songs just in my classroom and more at home. I'm a folk song geek. I have one of the largest private collections of folk song collections, probably among any teacher in Fairfax County Elementary School. I have thousands of songs on my bookshelves throughout the last 200 years from many countries and most of the what are considered significant folk song collections ever published. So it's nice to be able to use a lot of those, and Fairfax County encourages that, so that's a good thing. That's a big part of my approach. I like to do that collaboratively with other teachers when we're given the time to meet together. That's very important to me. Another thing that's very important is here's the Blackboard assessment tools that are shared. There's many on eCart too. I'm going to skip ahead to one of those. So here is a focused picture of one of those things from that folder I just pointed to. So when planning, it's not really complete if we don't plan with the assessment we're going to use in mind. So if I want to make sure my third graders are understanding meter, and what is the difference between 3/4 and 2/4? Well, can they draw the bar lines in to match the time signature? So everything I've been learning in first and second grade for note values of quarter notes and half notes and quarter rests and eighth notes, they can't do this correctly here if they haven't put all that information together. So I'm assessing their understanding, and then I can go back and redirect instruction through my next planning if they're not getting it. So what do we want the kids to be able to do after a lesson that they couldn't do before the lesson? How are we going to know they are can do it, and what are we going to do if they can't do it? That's important in planning, is the assessment piece, the cycle, So I think that's a pretty good overview of the resources I like to use, online and print resources, my personal ones, the county ones, a few that I go to a lot. This Could I Today, appendix in the back of that book, which gives you great selections to consider using for whatever specific element you're working on teaching with the kids. It also has some assessment tools too. My conversational solfege resources, my literature, kids' books, and cross-curricular connections at every grade level. These are things that are important to me. I'm a little bit over. I was trying to keep this down to 10 minutes, but pretty close. There's 10:52, and I'm going to wrap that up. Thank you for listening to my planning overview.